Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam. This is Weekend Watch Repair, and we have got one heck of a project in store for us today. What we're looking at is an Omega Constellation from 1955. This particular watch is owned by a subscriber and Patreon supporter named Jim. And Jim, to his credit, he is a patient man because he has been waiting on me for months and months and months to get to this thing. And we're finally here. So, Jim, thank you for your patience. I know you waited quite a long time, and I sure appreciate it. So, Jim bought this watch, he tells me last year. This watch had spent some or all of its life in Costa Rica. And without being, giving away too much, let's just say that this watch needs a lot of help. On its outward face, it looks like just a well-loved and well-worn vintage Omega. It looks pretty nice, but when we get into this watch, boy, we are in for a surprise or a couple. Before we do that, if you wouldn't mind, folks, I sure would appreciate it if you liked and subscribed to the channel, liked the video, subscribe to the channel. It sure helps us reach a larger audience, and that's never been a huge thing for me, but it is pretty cool. Subscribing does have its benefits, as you see on screen. I don't know who wouldn't want their watch to have an extra hand that always pointed to snacks. I sure would. So, I've been told that's a thing. So subscribe and find out. Oh, that was awful. Anyways, folks, so I'm just doing some QC on this watch real quick before we kind of get started. Winding feels good. Time setting feels pretty good. Cannon pinion tension feels all right. But so at this point, nothing's really standing out as being wrong other than just this watch needing, it's just well used and likely just needs a service. And really, before I probably should have said from the outset, don't adjust your screens. I know this is the second video in a row on this channel that we're not servicing a Seiko. So, your eyes are not deceiving you. It's weird for me too. But this really is a cool watch. I've never had an Omega Constellation personally. I've always had a wanting for one of the Pan dial constellations, and I think those are the most well known, the most popular, albeit most expensive variant of that. This particular watch kind of changed my mind about that, and we'll get into that here in a bit, but this is kind of a unique variant. Initial time grapher readings, I have a full wind in the watch, and from the onset, it looks like our beat air's not bad. I did notice that, this is an Omega 354 movement, and that movement is has a 50-degree lift angle, so I'm just fixing that on the timing machine. That won't affect timekeeping results, but what it will do is give us a more accurate amplitude reading. Initial readings with everything set correctly, dial up, we're running 30-ish seconds slow. Amplitude's not great. Beat air's honestly not bad. We move it to dial down and we get about a 30 to 40 second jump in the positive. So not great. And then we turn it to a vertical position and it starts to take a nosedive on us again. So all in all, this honestly isn't terrible. This is what a watch can look like. Not always what it does, but usually what it can look like when it's long overdue for a service. Before we start tearing this watch down, I wanted to take a look at the crystal, as the plan is to replace it, but original Omega crystals, at least on these old vintage ones, modern ones may be the same, but see, we're really zoomed in. You see that Omega logo? That's actually etched on the underside of the crystal. And so I don't know if this is an original crystal, but it is an authentic Omega crystal. But we are going to replace that. In order to remove the watch from the case, this has a snap-on case back. So what I'm looking for here is the little cutout on the case back that will allow me to insert the tool in order to pop that case back off. Sometimes they can be a bit difficult to find, but we found this one almost next to the lug. So what we'll do is just use some plastic to protect the case, and I'll insert this in there and pop that case off, just like that. And this thing has just a gorgeous golden medallion on that case back. I believe that's just of a observatory or something like that. I am not a psychohistorian by any means, so if they use a particular term for that, I would appreciate it if someone let me know. Additionally, that case back is missing the case back gasket. There is not one in this watch, so that's not good, especially coming from the climate that it did. Okay, folks, major problem number one is that our rotor does not have full movement. See how it's binding up in this one direction? That's either caused by one of two things. Either something is in there physically keeping it from moving, or it was assembled incorrectly. I'm going to go with the latter, and that's what I'm thinking right now when I'm doing this. Is that I'm thinking it's probably assembled incorrectly. There's a particular orientation you have to have a few of these parts in when you assemble the rotor on these bumper movements in order for the rotor to have full travel. And more than likely, it was assembled incorrectly. So we're going to dig into that and find out. The first thing we're going to do here is remove this upper automatic works bridge, and these very long screws are that length because they not only hold down that upper bridge, but they also go through the lower bridge and hold that down as well. So those extra long screws are basically holding down two plates that are sandwiched together. And that's common. We'll see that in a couple places on this movement. Speaking of this movement, I probably didn't say it already, so we'll say it now. This is an Omega 354 bumper movement. And so I'm pretty excited to bring this to you because this will be the first bumper movement, at least that I've shown on this channel. And so I'm very excited to bring that to you. It'll be something new and different. And what we are removing right now is the ball bearing yoke along with the core and the crown wheel driving wheel. And that crown wheel driving wheel is one of the parts that gets very heavy use and can get worn as you see in this picture. So we're going to go ahead and replace that. That is one of the pieces that is commonly very worn on a watch that has ran for a long time and due for a service. The good news about that is normally, since that is a steel pinion on that driving wheel, those teeth engage with the crown wheel. And normally when you see that really heavy wear on that pinion, you'll see corresponding wear on the crown wheel. But in our case, our crown wheel teeth are in excellent condition, so we don't have to worry about replacing that. We just need a driving wheel. So that's pretty good. The next piece we're removing, these springs are the bumper in this bumper movement. So what these are is basically dampening springs. And what they do is, since that rotor, that only winds the watch in one direction, but the rotor, it bounces off those springs when it hits the edge of the travel and just dampens the abrupt stop of the rotor. And so if you've ever had a bumper movement, or if you own a bumper movement watch, be it an Omega 354 or any other number of them, more than just Omega, you definitely know that you have a bumper movement on your wrist. You can feel it. It feels different. Some Seikos you can feel, but a bumper movement feels completely different when you're wearing it. But if the rotor is obstructed or doesn't have those springs in there to soften that blow, it amplifies that feeling. So those do dampen it quite a bit. But those are the bumper in this bumper movement. So with all that out of the way, and you saw we removed our jumper for that ball bearing yoke, we're going to go ahead and remove power in this watch. And that balance sure did take a sudden stop. That's really not a good thing. But the reason I remove power is we're about to take the movement out of the case. And I want to go ahead and just align the hands right now so that when I do pull the stem out and pull this watch out of the case, I don't need to reinstall the stem in order to align the hands before we remove them. There is one case clamp holding this movement in place. Omega gets away with just using one case clamp because at the 12 o'clock position of the main plate of this movement, there is a little steel stud that sticks out. And that steel stud sits into a recess machined inside the case, and it orients itself right in there. So when that's in place, you only need one case clamp in order to hold this thing in place. And this case is a tight squeeze in there. So Clever engineering on Omega's part, but we only need one case clamp in this watch. One thing I didn't notice is when we turned it over briefly, a screw fell out. See that? We'll get into that here in a minute, but we a screw came from somewhere. We pulled this stem out, and as you can see, our stem is quite rusted. And if I can get the camera to focus ever so briefly, what is left of our gasket inside this crown is basically, it's disintegrated almost completely. So that needs to be taken care of. Taking a look at this screw, at the moment, I think I know what it is, but we'll find out for sure here in a moment. So with everything removed, we can separate the movement from the case. But on this particular watch, that is easier said than done. As you can see, it doesn't really just want to fall out, even though we've removed every obstacle that's keeping us from doing it. The reason is just because this is a very tight squeeze in there. There's no additional movement ring. This case is sized to this movement. So what I'm going to do is just give it a little bit of a helping hand here. Kind of with that lifted up, it just kind of breaks that hold that's on there. And now we can safely separate these. And we'll zoom in here, and not counting the rust and corrosion and dirt, but there is that little steel stud that indexes into the side of the case. And with that in place, that's why this watch only has one case clamp. But we do have a fair amount of corrosion there that we're going to have to deal with. Being ever so gentle and using plastic to protect this gorgeous dial, we can safely remove our hands. And so this watch here is kind of a unique variant. I had mentioned before, I've always wanted a pipe hand Constellation. Those are far and away the most expensive, the most prized collectible ones. But this watch really changed my mind. This particular watch is a rather unique combination. So what we have, they call them shark tooth indices. Sometimes I've also seen them referred to as arrowhead indices. With that and the crosshair dial, that is not a super common variant. So pretty cool, unique Omega. But I was going to separate the dial from the case, and turns out, taking a look, we are missing both of our case clamp screws. These screws should screw in through the side of the movement and screw into the dial feet. But this thing is missing it. So whoever last put this watch together, they only had one case clamp screw, apparently, because it was just kind of sitting in there, but not really connected to anything. But there is nothing holding this dial to this movement. Now, when it's in the case, it's kind of sandwiched together, so it's not really going to move. But the danger with that is that you can very easily break dial feet. These dial feet are just brass. And so if this watch took a hard bump, normally when you have that screw in, it just kind of holds everything together. But when those dial feet screws are not in, this thing could have broken dial feet off. And thankfully it didn't. Thank goodness it didn't. That would be fixable, but I'd rather not have to do that on this watch. But the one screw we did find that just fell out of the movement when we turned it over, because it was clearly not screwed in properly. This is indeed a dial foot screw, but we only have one of the two. So either the second screw is still in the movement somewhere, which I doubt, or we're going to have to find one. Spoiler alert, we had to find one. So before we begin disassembly, what I like to do on each side of the movement, it doesn't always make it on film, is just go through the microscope and do a close once over on everything. Here you can see that screw just poking out. That hole right there is the hole where the dial feet goes into the movement, and you can see that screw, when it's screwed in, it's going to screw into the dial foot to secure it. Past that, and just looking past just all the dirt and gunk that's on here, nothing stands out as being extraordinarily wrong. It's just there's a lot of dirt on this, especially on that main plate. It's just caked in stuff and just generally gross. The dial side of this movement is rather uncomplicated. Since this does not have a calendar, a day or date function, or any other additional complication on it, it's a pretty basic keyless work and motion work setup. Here we are removing our setting lever spring, and we just loosen the screws at first just so that we could pull the spring off of the setting lever and break any tension on it. And now we can just simply remove those two screws and lift this thing out of the way. Our minute wheel can come off, followed by our setting wheel. And I'm just double checking the teeth on that to see if one side has a radius cut to the teeth, just so I can make sure to orient it properly when we reinstall it later. Our setting lever spring is kind of buried down there a little bit, so just using some Rodico just to hold it in place in case I slip, but just to make sure this spring doesn't go flying on us. We can safely remove that. And just with the rest of our Keyless Works parts. Here's our yoke, our winding pinion and sliding clutch, kind of stuck together with some old lubricant, but those come out together. And we can pull our cannon pinion off. And so our setting lever is going to remain in place because it is screwed in from a screw on the other side of the movement. So we'll unscrew that when we work on the rear side of the watch. Since this has to come out at some point, we might as well take it out now. We're going to go ahead and remove the lower balance jewel and chaton. That cap jewel spring is called an Inca block spring. And those were invented in the late 30s. Around in the 40s, companies like Zenith and I believe a few others began using it. And then by the 50s, they were basically almost an industry standard for Swiss watches. Brilliant design, simple. You just have to be very careful when you're hinging it up and down to make sure it doesn't kink on you. But yeah, they're good. So moving over, we're going to do a kind of a close look at the rear side of this watch, and the dirt and the gunk factor is tripled compared to the dial side of the movement. But we're just taking a look to see again if anything looks crazy on us. If the keen eyes among you, if you look at that center second driving wheel right in the dead center of it, you'll see a problem, but we'll detail that here in a moment. But it's just covered in gunk, and what in the world is this? Like, I don't even, like, how, take a look at that. Like, how does that even happen? Folks, so we're gonna, yeah, it's, somebody really did a number on this watch. It's kind of sad to see. It's going to get worse as we dive deeper into it. And I'll try to refrain from saying what's really going through my head at this moment. But yeah, it's what some people pass off work. And again, I am not a professional by any means, far from. It's even in the name of the channel, Weekend Watch Repair. It's I don't do this to make a living, but you still know what's proper and what's not. And someone really just cut a lot of corners on this watch and did a disservice to an otherwise fantastic watch. One of the major disservices is coming right now. So this is a first for me, folks. Take a look at this lubrication in this upper balance pivot. It's like, I mean, I've in my entire time of working on watches, I have never seen that. There shouldn't even be oil there. But yes, I don't know what someone was thinking or how oil could have possibly got there. Not just a little oil. That is a massive amount of oil. Although it is pretty interesting to see capillary action and the surface tension of the oil kind of hold it in suspension like it is. More oiling here. We have a little pond of oil on top of our center seconds driving wheel. You think they got enough of it on there? There's a whole other issue with that. That is another first for me. But just kind of doing a more detailed inspection now that we've got a couple things out of the way. And, I think that I could see some dirt and stuff in there, but I'm going to swap. I put a little sticky note on my bench just for a better backdrop. And you can see all the fibers and just stuff in there. Like, I don't know how that, like, if, you assemble a watch and say, oh, well, that's acceptable. more fibers and hair. We have some verdigris beginning to form, which is a corrosion in the copper layer of this brass alloy. It's early stages of corrosion. We'll have to take care of that. But you saw between the crown and the case back, this thing didn't have much in the way of gaskets. Our ratchet wheel has a massive amount of travel in it, side shake, and that is not good at all. So yeah, just the further we dig, the worse it's getting. And wait till we get into that. That is, I mean, I'm trying to find YouTube safe adjectives to describe my thoughts about what someone did to that, but we'll see here in a bit. This spring that we're removing is the jumper spring for our chronograph, or for our crown wheel driving wheel. And we have some stringy Rodico. That's basically what happens. This Rodico I'm using is, it's not new. That during teardown, I usually, if I have a piece from the previous watch, I'll use it. But when the Rodico starts to really get worn out, it starts to get stringy, like you saw. So you'll see that a little bit. But I always use fresh Rodico when we're assembling. Never, ever, ever use anything but fresh Rodico when assembling a watch. So we already removed the 2 screws that hold down the back side of this plate earlier. And now we have that one large extended screw that we just pulled off. And that's actually holding down the far side of the wheel train bridge as well. We get that lower automatic works bridge off. And our center seconds pinion has its own little mini bridge. So we're going to go ahead and take this off. And there's a cutout on the side of that that will allow us to put our screwdriver in to lift it away safely. So once we get this screw out of the way, we can go ahead and pop that off. Clever little spot for that. But that removes. Now this pinion is an extremely delicate part. So I'm trying to deliberately use the lightest touch I possibly can when lifting this center seconds pinion out of the way. But we get it out, and we do have a little bit of gunk, and there is some light corrosion on that. Using a special Presto tool, we will separate and pull off this chronograph or center seconds driving wheel, not a chronograph driving wheel. Goodness gracious, Adam. But that did feel very odd when removing. Those are pressed on and held on by friction, and the extended pivot of that third wheel that driving wheel mounts to is slightly tapered. So what'll happen is when those things get worn, they tend to, the hole will widen. When they do, it's basically not usable anymore. But when they're on there correctly, it does take a fair amount of pressure to put them on and take them off. And that thing came off, it felt much too easy. So we're going to take a look at that. And there is a major issue with that wheel. Removing our balance, I'm just being very careful to make sure my hairspring does not touch that center wheel as we remove it, because sometimes if that center wheel is a very large diameter, that hairspring could interfere with it. We got that out of the way, and now I'm just going to check in-shake on the wheel train. So in-shake on our center wheel looks pretty good. Third wheel is always a difficult one to check. And it's tough because you may look at the edge of the wheel, but you're going to see some flex on the wheel. I'm actually looking at the pivot to see what the up and down movement is, because that's a better representation of it. Third wheel looked good. Fourth wheel there looks good. The in-shake on our escape wheel looks good, but we do have it's not so much a problem more than it is you just kind of have to laugh. But we'll go ahead and zoom in here and take a look at the upper jewel. If that chronograph driving wheel had a pond of oil, this thing here's got an ocean of oil. I mean, literally, you could go fishing in that thing. Goodness gracious. All right. Moving on. I'm just double checking the in-shake of the pallet fork. And as we move away from the barrel towards the pallet fork escape wheel, the in-shake should get less and less. And our pallet fork and our balance should have the least amount of in-shake, and those need to have the same amount of in-shake, just so the relationship of the pallet fork and the impulse jewel remains consistent between, different positions. So, but the in-shake there looked good, actually, so I'm pleased to see that. The ratchet wheel comes off, and now we can remove our click. And so what I really like about this particular design, which is not unique to Omega, but the click spring is designed in such a way that the click is not under tension at rest. So if you need to install or remove it, you don't have to worry about that spring flying off. You can just simply lift it out of the way. In order to get the spring out, again, we will smother it in some Rodico, and I will try to very gently get underneath the spring and lift it up out of its little recess in the barrel bridge. And I believe here we have some seriously stringy Rodico, if memory serves. Oh, yeah. So that's when it gets worn out. I mean, that's what it'll do. It cleans up easy enough. You just dab it a few times, but it's good enough for disassembly. I definitely will not be using this Rodico during anything on assembly. Moving on, we can remove our crown wheel. And if you notice, the screw we just screwed out first is different from the screw on the left. That one I'm picking up now, the one on the left, is not the correct screw for this part. So actually, it seems insignificant. So, I mean, someone just found a screw and put it in because it fit. And, I was talking with Jim, and there was a few things in there. We needed a dial foot screw. We need a chronograph driving wheel. And I sent him info on all this stuff. And I said, well, Jim, on this screw, we could technically, goodness gracious, there's a lot of lubrication there. I said, we could technically keep the screw. It does function. It's just not correct. And, one thing I like about Jim, because, he said, Adam, I just want the watch done right, and I said, I pulled up some old documentation, found the part number for that screw, located one. And he said, it wasn't terribly expensive. Well, I'm going off memory here, and Jim would probably know more than I would, but it was like $10 or $16 or something for one screw, which is kind of silly for a tiny little screw, but it matters. And so if you want the watch to be correct, well, it matters. And I'm trying to get rid of any evidence of this previous watch. I don't want to call him a watchmaker because I'm not a watchmaker, not by trade. And I have a lot to learn before I ever give myself that title, or I don't even think I can. I'm not allowed to give myself that title. I'm not a watchmaker. I'm a watch repairer and servicer and a hobbyist. But whoever, I'm trying to get rid of any evidence of this previous person being in this watch, because what they did to this thing should, there should be a crime against cruelty to watches. And what he did to this thing would qualify, in my opinion. Maybe it's off topic and maybe not normal for this kind of video, but I'll tell you, some people have asked me, why did you start working on watches? And there's a few answers to that. It's multiple reasons. I've always liked tinkering on things. I'm kind of a mechanical person, technical person. But also I had a watch serviced once, and I got it back and everything seemed to work fine, and I had no issue with it, but I thought, man, it'd be cool to learn how to do this. And then I also thought about, well, I didn't have a time I didn't have any machines at the time. It just, you put the watch on your wrist. If it tells the right time, then great. But I said, well, how do you know that the person really did a thorough job? How would you know? Because you can have a watch run poorly and still keep good time for a little while. And so that kind of started me down a rabbit hole. And with my obsessive personality, all of a sudden I'm buying tools and I wasn't really fixing watches at first more than I was breaking them. But eventually I got better. But that's kind of the thing. And as I've gotten into this hobby more, and I've worked on my own watches, I've worked on other people's, I've seen that there's a lot of great people out there and a lot of highly competent watchmakers. But there's also people who cut corners and just try to say something just to sell a watch on or whatever. And I don't know the story on this watch. I don't know if it was that what we're fixing here was done to this watch recently to sell it last year, or if it was done 15 years ago. Real quick. So take a look at the side shake on this barrel. See how much that's among the most I've ever come across. So this thing has worn for a really, really, really long time. And so what someone did when it has that much movement, the you'll see that the ratchet wheel will start to wear into the barrel bridge. Instead of fixing the problem, what someone did, aside from getting hair and junk in there, is they just caked it in grease. Rather than fixing the problem, they just smothered it in grease. That's not going to fix anything. And so just more of those things where they just do a bad job. And so this is one of them. And that's kind of why I started doing it. And, it's cool. Like Jim can, this isn't going to live forever because it's online now and it's going to be forever. So at least Jim has the knowledge to, that he can see what work goes into this watch. And at least he'll know I did my absolute best on this thing. And, he'll get a watch back that's running properly. But when I first started, that was my question. Well, how do you know? Because I was surprised to see that you don't always get time grapher readings. And even on watches I work on for people that don't go on YouTube, I do send them, video of time grapher readings that you can see your watch because I know I would want to know that. So that's kind of why I got into it and why, I'm glad I get to work on this thing because maybe we can do this, give this watch some justice after it was savaged by somebody else. But I'm sorry for the long-winded deal here, folks. But I mean, that's kind of why I started doing it. But kind of one of the depressing things on there is you don't always know how good of work you're getting. And unfortunately, I have seen, and people pay good money. I won't name numbers. I won't, none of that. But people who paid a lot more than I charge to work on these, and the work that they got was really substandard. And again, I'm not calling my work superior, but it's honest. And that's the thing where there's some people out there with not a lot of integrity on these, and I hate to say it, but there is. So that's why I started doing it, and I'm just glad we get one less watch out there that has this done to it. Sorry, folks, but on that barrel, by the way, or that barrel bridge, I should mention, I that was one other thing that I spoke with Jim about, and a major parts cost on this thing, because I told Jim, I said, there's one of my favorite YouTube channels out there is Chronoglide. That guy is an incredibly accomplished, highly qualified watchmaker. He's an instructor, works on extremely valuable vintage and rare pieces, makes parts on vintage machines, does so much cool stuff. He has a catchphrase that I will not even be, it's absolutely his. Credit where credit is due. He calls it hammer time, but you can close barrel arbors ports on bridges that are too wide with a staking set. But when when a barrel is wound, there's always tension pushing against that hole in the barrel bridge in one direction, always in the same direction. And so what'll happen is that wear, when you see all that movement, that wear is all that hole being ovaled in one direction only. So it's not just widening the hole, it's ovaling it only on one side. So when you have that much hole, I told Jim, I said, I don't think I can close the hole that much because if I do, the center of the hole is not going to be dead center between that and the lower bridge. The proper fix for that, there's one or two fixes that would work. One is to get a lathe and machine out a larger hole, making sure that the center is in the proper place, and then install a bushing or jewel in there. The other fix is to just replace the bridge. I don't think that, doing the hammer time trick, which I have used with excellent results many, many, many times, but the bridge has never been that bad. And I think that one was just too far gone. So, what we did, we had to source a new old stock, 70-year-old, unused, authentic Omega 354 barrel bridge. We found one. And so thanks again to Jim for wanting his watch done right. That was long-winded. So, folks, here is a unique issue I've never run into before. Just more, I'm gonna be nice and not call it what I think, but just someone doing poor work. So, in this chronograph driving wheel, the center of that should just be a hole. And I saw this little piece of brass in there. I didn't know what it was. And so, what someone did, that this wheel's been worn out. It's been pressed down too far, and that hole's too wide. So normally, instead of replacing the wheel like they should, what they did is they put a brass shaving inside the hole and then pressed it onto the third wheel pivot, basically shimming it. Now, thankfully, this pivot on this wheel, I mean, that's a steel pivot, the shim's brass, so the pivot's in fine shape. Nothing wrong with the wheel. But what someone did, rather than replacing the part, they just shimmed it in order to get it on there. And that is just Bush League, in my opinion. Sorry, folks. But anyways, so right now we're going to take the case apart. Normally we do casework later, but I've got a lot of parts to order for this watch. And at the time of doing this, we're waiting on parts to arrive. So I'm just kind of finding work I can accomplish while my parts come in. So we pull our Omega crystal out. That's an armored crystal, and most of the gunk you see on there is on that armor ring inside there. We have a fair amount of dirt and a little bit of corrosion inside of our case. So we're going to go over this thing thoroughly with pegwood a few times, but we have some cleanup work to do. So once we get all that done, we're going to move it over to our ultrasonic machine, and we'll see what it has in store for us today. So after a fair amount of time with pegwood and a couple trips through the ultrasonic and drying, we're left with a clean case. So we have our replacement crystal. We'll go ahead and get this loaded onto the crystal press. And that upper die that we're using, the inside walls of that die are angled. They're not straight up and down. So what that's going to do is sort of squeeze that crystal inwards as it presses it down, compressing that armored ring and letting it seat in there. So we'll just press it down firmly, making sure it's all the way around, good and firm. And then when we take it off, I take it under some higher magnification and just make sure that crystal is seated fully all the way around. So one thing I did, if I can manage to get the light to hit it just right, you'll see we have an updated version of the Omega logo in there. And I did take my time to make sure that logo was oriented correctly up and down. So folks, here we go. Parts have arrived. You can see our old bridge on the left, our new bridge on the right. That is a 70-year-old, give or take a few years, new old stock Omega 354 barrel bridge. Never been out of the package. I removed it from its original wax paper, and that thing is just beautiful. But all the new parts go into the cleaning also, so just because they're new doesn't mean they're not dirty. So we're going to go ahead and give those the full treatment that everything else is going to get as well. A couple parts that we're not going to load in here are a couple of the springs, the tension spring for the center seconds pinion, the balance, the pallet fork, and, a couple other minor springs, click springs and stuff like that. Those will either be cleaned by hand or I'll clean balance and pallet fork in some one dip. Moving over to our cleaning machine, that first cycle is the cleaning solution. And the next 3 cycles are rinsing cycles. And so we move through those stages and we'll put it into a drying cycle. I take this opportunity every video to say heartfelt, and I do mean heartfelt and sincere thank you to the Patreon supporters of this channel. I just thoroughly enjoy the community we've built over there. I'm going to make a post on there. I have an idea regarding Patreon because honestly, I get a lot of messages on there, and that's great. I love talking with every one of y'all, but I find the chat feature a bit limiting. I have an idea. I've actually been working on it a little bit, but I need to get further educated on it myself. But I want to do something kind of cool for the Patreon members as well. And, one of the things on Patreon, and folks, you don't have to be a paying member to be on Patreon. A lot of free members, more free members on there than there are financially supporting members. And I just love the fact that you're over there. And for those of you who do support the channel financially, thank you so much. But even if you're there just to see updates, that's awesome. So thank you. I uploaded a video. I just got back from a week-long work trip, but before I left, I uploaded a private video just for Patreon supporters, and it was something I was having a discussion with one of them, and he had asked me a question that I've gotten a few times, and it was, well, how do I piece together a mainspring winder set? Because like if you're getting into the hobby, or if you've kind of looked, mainspring quality, good quality, like Bergeron mainspring winders are prohibitively expensive. It's just it's incredible what a full set of those cost. And so when I first saw it, I'm like, well, I guess I'm not getting mainspring winders because goodness. But you can piece together a set. But there's, when I was looking into it, and real quick, I would just, you saw us lubricate the balance jewels. We have a flat hairspring, which is lovely to see. Thank goodness. That's one problem I'm glad we didn't have to mess with on this watch. But he had asked, well, how do, can you provide some insight on how to piece together a set, economically, but using good components? And so that's kind of what it did. I did a little 10 to 15 minute video on there just for patrons, because there's a lot of what I found when I was researching it, when I was trying to piece mine together, was there's not a lot of reliable info. And certain items they sell, that say they're directional, you can actually get away with using them one way or the other. There's better info than what's readily out there. And so what I did was try to do my best. It ended up being, I thought it was going to be a 2 or 3 minute video. It ended up being 15 minutes or something like that. But where we just got into the nitty gritty of it, how to piece things together, what you can get away with, what you can't, and how to build a set and buy exactly what you need and nothing that you don't. And then also, because I kind of generally skip over it, like this one here, you saw me install this mainspring with a mainspring winder. And by the way, I did that on this video, on this watch, because the washer, this brand new mainspring came in, was just barely right on the edge of being too large. And I just, when I made it up to the barrel, I was looking at it, I'm like, this is like a 50-50 chance of me getting it in there correctly or not. Real quick. For the OCD among us, that was for you. So I just said, you know what? I took it out of that washer and just put it in a mainspring winder and installed it that way, just to make sure I got it safely in the barrel without flinging it off and, twisting the spring up. So, I really enjoyed doing that video for patrons. And so I put a deal on there. And if, patrons watch these videos, and I'm sure you're watching this, and whether it's the ad-free version that patrons get or just the regular version, I said it on Patreon, but, I'm trying to figure out ways I want to provide more value rather than just saying, thank you for your support. And I do mean it. Thank you. I want to provide you more value. And so if you have any ideas on topics you'd like to see shorter videos on, how do you do this? Or, is there a trick to doing, this or that? Send me a message. Let me know, because I really enjoyed making that video. It was, out of the norm. And, I think it provided I hope it provided some clarity on a thing I tried to figure out long ago, and I had to learn the expensive way. Yeah. So hopefully it'll allow folks out there to make a more informed purchase. And, but like, I'm trying to add more stuff like that to Patreon. Goodness, that was long winded, and I apologize, folks. This is not an ad for Patreon. I'm sorry. So you can see how well this movement cleaned up. This almost looks like a totally different watch. But boy, we spent a lot of time in pre-cleaning. I didn't want this video to be 2 hours long, but pre-cleaning on this watch was pretty intense. Multiple rounds of it, and then a full cleaning cycle. Brand new cleaning solution, new rinsing solution on the final rinse. Because when you don't change all 3 jars at once, you change. The final rinse jar becomes your middle becomes your first rinse. First rinse gets, disposed of and cleaned, and then you put brand new fluid and move that to the last position. But all new stuff. Real quick, this arrow that's on screen, that is for the extended screw that is going to, that screw is also what the lower automatic works bridge connects to. So we're leaving that out right now. But yeah, to make a long story short, this watch did go through one extensive and intense cleaning routine. But we got everything in. We got our brand new brand new 70-year-old, brand new Omega 354 barrel bridge, putting it in place. It's a tight squeeze on there. And we can go ahead and get these screws put in place as well. And once I verify free movement of the train one last time, I'm just going to go ahead and snug all 5 of these screws. Taking a look at the side shake on the barrel now, that is what proper side shake should look like. So I read it or I heard it said years ago. I didn't create the saying, but they were talking about, well, how much side shake should you have in your barrel arbor? And somewhere I heard it, read it, or whatever, but it stuck. And they said you need as little as possible, but some. And so I was, thought that's a really accurate, but yet specific way of describing it. And so if you can rewind and take a look, that's what we have there. We have as little as possible, but some. And that is when you want to know what perfect amount of side shake looks like on your upper barrel arbor. When it's in a brass plate, that's what you want to see. And even, that in 10 years, it's going to wear a little bit and it will still be fine. It'll have more than that, but it'll still be well within acceptable range. But, if this watch isn't serviced in 30 years or more, 50, you'll see it like it is. And in 70 years, you'll likely look like it did when on that old one. But yeah, that's what good side shake looks like. We got our click in place, and I was rambling through all of that, so my apologies. I catch myself rambling at times. I've heard people, I'm pretty self-critical about it, and I've heard some, I apologize in advance. Thank you for the nice comments. Some people say, I only watch your videos because of the rambling, and well, I think you're just being kind, but I think most people are just too polite to let me know that it annoys them. A little bit of grease goes on the barrel bridge. We get our crown wheel down, and I'm going to apply a little bit more inside the crown wheel where the core is going to sit and rotate around. If I can manage to get it in there. Now we can put our core into place. And that is one tight squeeze on that post for the crown wheel core. And that crown wheel core does not rotate. It is stationary, so we're going to get it on that post and press it down. But take a look at the fit between these two pieces. I mean, it is just dead on. There is no slack in there whatsoever. I mean, that looks like it's modern machining, but that's 70 years old. So it's incredible that they, and that's not even the most precise thing in these watches. It's just incredible what they were able to do without CNC or computer-aided, machinery of any type. Tolerances on these things are just incredible. Moving on, we're getting our ratchet wheel oriented with a square cutout for the arbor while getting the click spring and the crown wheel engaged with that ratchet wheel. Once the screw's in, we'll hold this wheel in place with a little plastic tool, and we can go ahead and snug that screw. Moving on, I'm going to go ahead and lubricate the wheel train, beginning with the rear side of the watch. Someone had left a comment recently, and they're not wrong by any means, but they said, well, why don't you lubricate the wheel train while the watch is running? It helps distribute the oils better. I've done it both ways. I mean, for me right now, it's just convenient because everything is accessible. I've never had issue one way or the other. In a few minutes from now, the watch is going to be running. But, it's, I've never really had issue doing it one way or the other. I've probably done more with him running than not running. There's no rhyme or reason to answer that specific comment, but, I've seen that before, but, if it does make a difference, I really haven't noticed. And, for the few minutes that oil's sitting there, capillary action will hold it there, where it needs to. It's just with the watch running doesn't mean it's going to move that lubricant to places where it wouldn't otherwise if it's stationary. So, but that's why. It's just the way I do it. No particular reason. I'm applying some thin amount of lubrication to the inside of the main plate there on that side wall where the winding pinion's going, and then our sliding clutch can drop in. And even though we got, most of the rear side of the watch done, we're going to go ahead and get all of our keyless works installed because I want to be able to put some wind in this watch through the crown and not use the screw on the ratchet wheel. On certain movements, and it's a kind of known as a Seiko channel, use a Seiko reference, although they're not the only ones to do it, but like a Seiko 6139 Pogue chronograph, or among dozens of other movements, they're automatic only. So there's no option to wind the watch other than using that ratchet wheel screw when you're working on them. But and I've used it before, even on watches that can wind. But for a person who made the comment, years ago, I'm sure someone has, and they would be correct. It is safer. I'm not taking a chance on marring anything, but if my screwdriver slips or something. So real quick, I am installing the setting lever, and since it's screwed on from the opposite side, I'm just using a piece of clean Rodico to hold that setting lever in place. I find this technique, I did not invent this technique. I saw it done at some point, and I'm like, well, that's clever. And so I use it when I can, just making sure that when I screw this in, I'm not pressing down hard on the screw, because if I do, it's just going to push that setting lever off the main plate. So I'm just using a light touch to get a thread or two started, and then we can go ahead and screw it down. Once we got it in place, we can flip this thing back over, retighten it in our movement holder, and we can pull this Rodico off. And now I just want to check and make sure that it's sitting in that groove correctly in the stem and everything's moving freely. So everything's looking good. We can continue. One thing worth noting, although it really wasn't an issue on this watch, I've had an issue before on an Omega bumper movement. When installing the cannon pinion, if you haven't put on that lower automatic works bridge with that extended screw that also holds down the one side of the wheel train bridge, that cannon pinion not pushed down all the way, because it's when you press that cannon pinion on, that stud it's going onto is the center wheel. And that center wheel is held in place by that bridge. And if that bridge is missing the screw on one end of the bridge, if you press down firmly, that bridge will raise up ever so slightly, and you won't get full travel down on the shaft of your center wheel. Wasn't the case with this watch. I mean, everything went fine, but when you're putting that on, just kind of make mental note. If you're doing one of these, just kind of don't press down real hard. My goal was just to kind of get it on there a little bit. And if it didn't go down all the way, it's not a big deal. We'll continue with assembly. And once we get that other screw in, we can just simply flip the movement over and pop that down the rest of the way once we have all the screws on our wheel train bridge. Sometimes they go down easy. Sometimes you want to make sure that other screws in there. But again, it wasn't an issue on this watch, and maybe it wasn't even worth saying, but it may be. And it's just something I've ran into in the past that I thought I would share. We're applying some red lubricant. That red lubricant is HP 1300 to the post for the setting lever or setting gear rather, and the minute wheel and the little raceway. And so if you're ever curious about the tools or the lubricants or the polishing materials, stuff like that, a Patreon member asked a while ago, several months, 8-9 months ago, I'm guessing at this point, if I could kind of detail out the common tools I use and all that and where I got them. And I thought that was a great idea. So I did that. And so there in the description of this video, along with, I believe, most others on the channel now, in the description, there's a link to a Google spreadsheet. It's a free document that anybody has access to. And that document, I mean, it's not an official thing by any means. It's just what I use. And it turns out there's quite a bit of stuff when I finally compile all the data together. It was scary to think that at some point or another, I've actually bought all that stuff. But it's just what tools I use. And I think what will be more helpful for folks is one of the columns of that spreadsheet is a notes column. And it, if I would just had some thoughts on, hey, I bought this tool, but I wish I had bought a different one because here's the problem, at least that I have with it. Or I bought a cheap version and it works so well, I never found the need to buy an expensive version. Things like that. There's also a column on there because they would request, well, what do you think are the essential tools if you want to get into the hobby? What do you just absolutely have to have? And what can you get away with not having? What's more of a luxury? And so one of the columns on there is essential. It's a yes or no. And so things like screwdrivers, tweezers, lubricants, things like that, those are essential. But you don't necessarily need a staking set to start working on watches. There are certain things you can't fix with that one, but you don't need one to take a watch apart and put it back together. And if you don't have an issue that requires a staking set to fix, then you don't need one. But I would say 98% of all the tools and stuff I use on there is on there. I recently got asked about like polishing cases and stuff like that. What kind of wheels do I use, or polishing compounds, um, cutting compounds, stuff like that. So I added a whole section there on that, different compounds, what kind of wheels I use, what kind of speeds I use, stuff like that. So that's a free document available to anyone. You don't have to be a Patreon member. You don't even have to be a subscriber. You can just go there and take a look, and hopefully it'll help some folks out. So there you go. Oh, one other thing I should note is that any Amazon links on that document are affiliate links. A large portion of those parts did not come from Amazon. That's just where I purchased them, whatever links, whatever website it goes to. Anything purchased on Amazon, I do earn a hilariously small commission on, although it does not cost the buyer anything additional. I mean, if I told you what I've earned to date from Amazon, you'd laugh. I could probably buy a cheeseburger with it. So, but anyways, folks, installing the balance doesn't always go perfect. Sometimes they fight you a little bit, and this one fought me. So I always keep everything real with you. Had a little struggle in this one, but I'm going to keep the entire process in there. And plus the background music's awesome. So let's do it. Touchy. It was indeed very touchy, but tell you what, the process of putting that balance in just about took the entirety of that intro music, which for some strange reason just seemed to fit the moment. When I was doing it, it was pretty cool. Five fake points to whoever can name that series. So initial time graph of results. This is after the watch has been running about an hour. This is the exact footage I sent to Jim. We've gone through a couple adjustments. You can see timekeeping between positions remains pretty steady. Amplitude in the 240s, 250s. It actually bumps up a little bit, ever so briefly. But, we 5-6 seconds between positions at the moment. Again, about an hour running. So these are really encouraging results. Amplitude will rise as this thing runs in over the next several days. There is a very slight poising issue on the balance on this thing. So we do lose a little bit of time, not much by any means, but a little bit of time in the vertical positions. That is a poising issue on the balance. I was speaking with Jim, and we opted just to kind of leave it alone. We're flirting with danger. And at some point, one of the things you have to worry about is, are you trying to fix a real issue, or are you chasing time grapher readings? And so I think we would just be chasing time grapher readings at that point, but not kind of worth the hassle or the risk or the time. But the watch is running beautifully. So we're going to move on and let this thing run in. I am removing power because it is time to do the center seconds driving wheel. You see, I got it right that time. Center seconds driving wheel. We want to install that, and that's press fit onto the extended pivot of the third wheel. And I don't want this watch running when we press that on. So we have a replacement original factory Omega driving wheel. And so what I'm doing is I move this over into I'm using a hand press, a different one than I use for hands. This is the one I used prior before I got that really cool one, but we want to press this on straight, directly up and down. We don't want to go at any angles. And so that is the procedure, although I think it is worth mentioning that it's a multi-step procedure. That is a procedure used each time. And right now we're applying the tiniest amount of 9010 lubricant to the top of that center seconds pinion friction spring, and we'll go ahead and drop that in. But that's a press fit, and on a brand new part that's never been installed, it takes a significant amount of pressure to get it down there, but you just inch it down just in tiny amounts. And I fit the pinion on there to see how low, because I want that wheel to engage it, but be low enough to engage the pinion on the center seconds pinion, but not interfere and not rub the underside of that pinion's bridge. So there's some test fitting back and forth, just making sure it's at the right depth before we call it good. But that's just a back and forth thing. I didn't put the whole procedure in there, but it is using that tool is how we do it. Moving on, the next piece we're going to install is the lower bridge for the automatic works. We'll get this set into place. And that one extended screw is going to screw that in. And that is the final screw to hold down the wheel train bridge. So again, that's the one I was referencing earlier when we're talking about the cannon pinion. If you are doing one of these and you have difficulty getting your cannon pinion to go all the way down, don't force it. Just continue assembly until you get that screw in. Getting our automatic work click spring into place. I'm just making sure that I have everything correct on there, and we can go ahead and put our screw in place. Next thing we're going to do is pull this spring back and set our jumper into place. And it's a little bit of a balancing act getting the screw in there. And so, but here we go, getting it in. In hindsight, it would have been easier because we need to put a little bit of lubrication between that spring and the jumper. I didn't do that before, so I'm just pulling the spring back and applying that grease now. Honestly, would have been easier to do it before I put the jumper on, but no big deal. And we'll just make sure we have free movement. That is a shouldered screw, and I did put a very small dab of HP 1300 on that shouldered screw. The rest of the automatic works will be assembled when the watch is in the case. So moving on to finish the dial side, a little HP 1300 on the outside of the cannon pinion, and we can put on our hour wheel. We did get our other dial foot screw installed, so I've got that screwed into the movement, and we can drop our dial on. I'm just being very, very careful. The dial feet are a bit of a tight squeeze into the movement, but there we go. And now we can go ahead and cinch these screws down. And I do this a few times before everything is said and done, but I'm just using this first opportunity before we put the hands on to go over this thing with Rodico and just clean up any bits I see on the dial that want to come off. And not going crazy, not really scrubbing anything. And I'm just kind of tapping it, not really wiping it, but just tapping it with clean Rodico. We can get our hands installed. And so since there is no calendar function on this, we can install the hand in any position. It does not matter, but we will need to align it before we do our hour hand. So we'll just go ahead and get this pressed on. Make sure it clears that raised Omega logo, and when everything's good, we can get our hour hand pressed into place, or minute hand rather, excuse me, and our second hand, and just a little bit of pressure. It does not take much on these. So after verifying our spacing between the hands is good, we can get this watch back into the case. I'm getting the 12 o'clock side in first to get that little nub on the end of the main plate into that recess in the case. Once that's in, we can go ahead and get the rest of the movement in. The rust has been removed from our case clamp, and we can secure that in place with its screw. We have and I probably mentioned it earlier, but that is a replacement stem and a genuine new old stock Omega crown with an absolutely perfect gasket in it. So good news there. We will have to trim that stem down to fit the case. And it was a bit of a challenge because Omega had two different crowns on those watches of the time. There was one that had 4 sides to the crown, another was an 8-sided crown. Jim's watch originally had a 4-sided crown, so we finally identified that part number and found a supplier with a new old stock one that wasn't charging just an arm and a leg for it, and we managed to get it for a fair price, so good deal. Got a replacement Omega crown with a perfect gasket in there. You may have noticed, and you take a look later, so the gasket tube has a little bit of, it's, I want to say damaged, but I mean, it's kind of deformed a little bit. But that was like that when I got the watch. But the sealing surface of that crown tube is still perfectly round where it needs to be. So I opted not to really do anything to that. We could have popped that out and maybe found a different crown tube. But from a function standpoint, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. The sealing surface is the deformation in the crown tube is not where the gasket seals. It's past that. So it will not affect function in any way, shape, or form. So I opted just to leave it alone. When you're kind of putting this component back together, the nub on the bottom side of that little click spring makes it, if you're not using a bench block, it can be quite difficult to put this thing back together, but with a bench block, it makes it easy to have relief for that little stud. We got our click back into place, and now we're going to get our crown wheel driving wheel installed and align those holes up with the core. And once we get that done, we can attach these 3 screws, and these are just teeny tiny little screws. Tiny little screws. A little bit of HP 1300 on the sides of this, exact same as when we're doing those reduction wheels on the Seiko Magic Lever System. Same concept, lubrication in the same spots for the same reasons. And we're also going to apply a little bit of HP 1300 to the bottom pivot, because that pivot's going to go down into the movement and will not be accessible when we install this part. A little bit of cleanup just to get rid of some excess lubricant on the top of that driving wheel. And now we can reinstall our bumper springs. And so I did put just a ultra thin coat of silicone grease on the edges of those springs. And my install method on these isn't the most camera friendly, mind you, so bear with me, but I'm just kind of compress the spring ever so slightly and just push it in with my finger. I find it to be the most safe method. But there we go. Same with the other one. You can actually put those springs in and then put that bridge on afterwards. I've just kind of, on the ones I've just done them this way, and it seems to work fine. But again, it doesn't make for the best camera footage, but you get the idea of how we're doing it. And then I'm just going to make sure they're not pinched or kinked on the ends or anything, and it's just sitting flat all the way down. So we're holding the jumper back for the paw, and then we're going to install this. But here's where we need to think about alignment in order to make this rotor rotate, have full movement back and forward. And so we want this, so now it's engaged with the crown wheel. So as we turn it, it's going to wind the crown wheel. And we want this thing to be as far left from this view as possible. So we're going to get this and kind of rotate it all as far left as it will go. And then after we apply a bit of lubrication to the lower pivot for the rotor, we're going to install this rotor basically kind of all the way to one side of its rotation. And I'm overshooting it here a little bit. I'm going to land on top of the spring, but we'll kind of set it in place. But what we're looking for is where this rotor, when we get the pivot in its jewel, the rotor, the teeth on that gear on the rotor, the first, opening on there needs to match up with the first tooth on that paw, right there where that arrow is. Those two need to mate up. That way, when the rotor travels in the opposite direction, it has the ability to access every tooth of that paw. Because if it doesn't, I think this was likely one tooth off. And because of that, we lost about 10 to 15% of our movement travel. Because if it's not on the very last tooth or very first tooth of that, it won't get full travel all the way across. So that's what we need to make sure of. But when we get those in place, there's tension from the ratchet wheel and the crown wheel on that driving wheel. There's a little bit of tension between all those parts. So sometimes what helps is just kind of rotating that rotor a little bit back and forth. And you'll either get, I don't remember if I got that in first. So yeah, we got the pivot for the driving wheel on first. And then we'll see the pivot for the rotor. There it goes. Now we're on. And so what's really cool about this, when it's all done correctly, you'll see we have free movement again, where that rotor reaches the bumper spring on each side. And then when we get this bridge screwed down, which we're putting those last two screws in, which also secure that far side of the lower bridge as well. So if we give this thing a test after we've got it screwed down, this thing is just butter smooth. So on these bumper movements, the counterweight on the outer radius of that rotor is very dense, very heavy. And so because of the nature of how this thing attaches, those things are just absolutely butter smooth. It takes no friction whatsoever to wind these things. And it only winds in one direction. The other way it charges. So I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup here, and then we'll just kind of test this thing again. And what we'll find, when that thing's running right, it's so it's the smoothest rotor ever on any watch. It takes nothing to move that back and forth, but one way will charge it. And then the other direction, it'll wind that mainspring. So there we go. It's just working perfect. So, and that's awesome. And that one was so smooth. It's just glass how smooth that is. So now we need to trim down the crown. And I've done this in a few videos. So I have one more ramble I'd like to get through in this video. So please bear with me if you're actually watching. This channel recently eclipsed a major milestone. And I wanted to acknowledge it because it means a lot to me, and I wanted to say thank you. But I got a notification. We recently surpassed 25,000 subscribers. It's amazing. But that raises the question, because one of my favorite things to do on this channel is giveaways. And I like to do them when we hit nice round numbers or certain milestones. So I think it's about giveaway time. Here's the problem, and here's the ramble, and here's where I need your help. I need to figure out what kind of watch to give away. I've got two of them in mind, and 25K is that's huge, right? At least to me that's a big deal. And so I want to do something real special. I've got two watches in mind. One of them is a Willard, and I'm going to give that away. I'm not giving that away yet, but that's one of the two watches. I'll at least let you know what that is. One of them is a Willard. I've had tucked away since I did the Willard on the channel for someone else. I've wanted one. I found one. It's in rough shape. And even in rough shape, that watch cost me a fortune, but nowhere near what a prime Willard costs, but still expensive. I've had that thing in my project drawer tucked away, just kind of saving it for a special occasion. And I always thought Willards were big until I, put one on my wrist, and man, gosh, I get it. Those watches are so awesome. That would be an insane, insane giveaway watch. So that's option one. Option two is another one. I've had this watch for like a year and a half, and I haven't put it on the channel for two reasons. One, one is it's a brand movement, and everything about this watch is something I've never worked on before, on video or off video, never worked on it. And so, I'm a bit hesitant, and there's not a whole lot of, there is some information out there, but not a lot. So it's going to be a challenge for me. It's a complicated watch. But I think it would be like, if I told you what it is, I honestly think you would have a hard time choosing between a Willard and this watch, especially the colorway of this watch. And would you rather be surprised? So here's the question I need from everyone. If you're actually with me still at near the video, an hour and 16 minutes in, let me know in the comments. Mystery watch, which is on the coolness factor, as cool or probably arguably even more cool than a Willard. You all will know what it is if I told you, but I've never had one on the channel. I've never worked on one. I've never worked on any from this brand ever. But I got to decide between the two, but I think we need to do a giveaway, and it needs to be cool. So I'm going to think about that. I would love to hear your opinions. So yeah, there we go. We got to do that. So we have a giveaway to do at some point because we hit 25K. Thank you so much. But folks, take a look at this finished watch. How unbelievable is this thing? I mean, Jim, I call dibs, right? You ever decide to sell this watch? I want it. I want first dibs. But goodness gracious, what a cool timepiece and a pleasure to work on. And it just came out so beautiful. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you again to the patrons of this channel, and I would like to call out our newest members to say a special thank you to them: Archer, Brian, Dave, and Tomash. Tomash, I hope we got your name right. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Thank you to y'all. I mean that so much. And thank you for watching. It means a lot to me that you're still here with me. These videos are not short, and they take an awful lot to put together. And so if you enjoy them, I really would appreciate it if you liked and subscribed to the channel. It does help. And it's one of the reasons, it's because of y'all that we hit 25K. So thank you again. I do post off and on Instagram. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go over there and take a look. But folks, that's the video. That's the watch. That's the project. That's the details on where I'm at on the next giveaway. So till the next video, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And I'll see you soon.